So we had been over the last 2 months talking about what it looks like, what we do as a community, and how we give and we fellowship and we serve and we pray and we, all the we's that we've been talking about. And Mark spent 3 weeks talking about what it means to give and to give generously. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to follow that up with some real life conversation, because how many of you know it's really easy to hear a sermon or a message and go, that is really good, except that I'm totally overwhelmed and I have nowhere to start. And is that really real life? And does that even actually work? It's so much easier to hear a sermon than it is to live it. Yeah? Anybody agree with me? Yeah? Okay. Because I agree with me. So I'm like, we're preaching some really good stuff. Now, if I could just live it, that would be even better. So what we did is we talked with some people who are living this out and who are walking this out. And we're going to talk to them today and interview them today. So I want to invite Les and Keisha up here. Les and Keisha Swientek. So while they're up here, I'm really sorry to the people on the sides. We have to kind of talk to each other, so we're going to have our back a little bit to you. And no offense, I'm sorry, but here's your mics. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to our cool furniture that we stole out of Mark's office.
It's really nice.
Yes. I said to Mark, please don't put me on a high stool, because I can't touch the floor. They could, but I couldn't. So he's like, all right, I'll bring you my office furniture. Now I'm good. See? Both feet. I can even do it. All right, so this is Les and Keisha Swientek. I said that correctly, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Their name is very
Difficult.
interesting to look at. Yep. All right, so why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Okay, well, we've been married 15 years this August. So, long journey. And we have a daughter, 8 years old, Satabria. Another
That's also
difficult
interesting
name.
to look at. Yep, Satabria.
Yeah, we did that on purpose. And then we've been coming to the river here for about 7.5 years. And Les, I think what we do for work, Les flies packages around the world. And I'm an executive assistant for the owners of Purgatory Resort.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. So to start this off, did you guys grow up in the church? Have you always been
No.
Christians? Like, what's your... Did you say no?
No, I didn't.
Oh, I just was like...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I didn't. And sort of in high school, I was in and out. I don't know if I even really remember what exactly church was. My mom tried to get me introduced. And so I didn't grow up in it. I didn't know much about it. It wasn't until my adult life that I started learning what it meant, what Jesus was about, and what church was about. And I'm still learning, but different from Keisha that did grow up. Her story's easy. Did you grow up in the church? And she says yes. And so she, different childhood. And it wasn't until my adulthood and even out of college that I really began to have my own walk and relationship with the Lord. And so it's a lot of different stories that us two have and what we draw upon.
Okay. So coming from those two different backgrounds, what was your understanding of finances, of money? What was your experience with that? What did your parents teach you, either in or out of the church, whichever?
Well, I didn't get taught much at all. I mean, it wasn't talked about in my house. It was a little bit closed off, and so I didn't have a good understanding of what it was. All I knew is that a lot of times we didn't have the money for it. I didn't know why, and I didn't know anything about the value of money. I didn't know how God related to it. I didn't know about savings. I didn't know about planning. It seemed a little bit weird to me, a little bit awkward to talk about. So I didn't know anything about it. It was strange for me.
And then for me, I think I was taught a lot about money. Growing up, my parents were very open about it. I saw them paying bills. We talked about the value of money, finding a good deal. So it was a complete opposite experience than what he had growing up.
So did your parents also teach you about tithing and giving and that sort of thing?
Definitely. So I knew, 10%. I may not have known the details of tithing. I knew it was 10%. I saw my parents faithfully tithing and also faithfully giving above the tithe. Anytime that they felt led to give above and beyond the tithe, they would.
Okay, so what was it like when you got together? Were you on the same page about money? Did these two worlds like collide in some way?
Yes, they did. Although I do want to clarify, even though I knew a lot about money growing up, I did not apply it to my adult life. For some reason, we were talking about this yesterday when we were thinking about coming up here. For some reason, I just didn't think, I guess I thought it was a childhood thing. That's what my parents did. That's how they dealt with money. It was old-fashioned. It wasn't how people do things now. It wasn't a modern thing. So when we came together, I'll give you a little story here. How I feel like it was a pivotal moment in our journey. I call it the tanning lotion incident. So we got married and we moved to Washington State, or off the coast of Washington State on an island. So we're very adventurous like that. And because we lived on an island, it was very expensive to live and groceries and whatnot. So I went off once a month and did the Costco run and, bought a carload of groceries and whatnot. So I went to Costco, I went to Target, all the fun shopping, right? Come back, we had been married for about a year, and I come back and was really excited that I found a $12 tanning lotion kit at Target. Because there's no sun in Washington. And I wanted a little color. Les thought that was the most ridiculous purchase that anyone would ever make. And because of that, his thoughts there, he said that I needed to take that package back next month. So I was a little bit embarrassed by I have to take this back to Target. What are they going to think of me? And also, but I did do it. But that was a pivotal moment, like, we need to get on the same page.
Well, first of all, this island sounds like Durango. We have to go somewhere far to go to all these places. But so was that the kind of like the trigger that started you guys getting onto the same page? How long have you been married at that point?
We had been married a little over a year at this point, and it was definitely the trigger for me. I knew in my mind that a high percentages of marriage failed because of money fights, and that had been instilled in me from my family, like divorce rate and all that growing up in the church. So I wanted to avoid that at all costs. And out of desperation, my best friend, I phoned a friend, and my best friend, she'd been telling me little bits about Dave Ramsey. And I called her and I was like, hey, I want to start this paying with cash and envelope thing. Can you tell me more about it? And she started telling me, you take out, you have envelopes, and you want $500 for grocery, for instance, and you put it in your envelope. And once that money is gone, you don't spend any more out of that. And so you have that for the month or for every 2 weeks, however you want to do it. So I took that information to Les, and I said, what are your expectations for our grocery budget and for this budget and for this and this and this envelope?
Okay, quick question. So before you got to this point, were you just doing whatever you wanted?
Yes. So
Yes.
Another little story.
I do want to hear the before,
Yeah,
just a smidge.
another little story.
I mean,
is
besides tanning lotion,
Right.
like what else was there?
Yeah, we have a lot more.
$12 is a number for us in our marriage. I think pre Dave Ramsey, because I remember we were like, let's go out to eat, and this was a few months into marriage, and Les is like, check the checkbook register. See how much we
that'll
have in
tell
it.
us if we can go out to eat.
Yep, we had $12, and we were like, let's go out to eat.
Obviously not very fancy, but that was our indication that we could go.
Okay, so the checkbook was what was telling you what you could and couldn't do it up until this point. All right, so you went to him with the Dave Ramsey idea, and what happened?
Well, I didn't necessarily reject it, but I said, okay, you go ahead and do that because you're you're controlling the grocery, and you just go ahead and do it. I'm not against it, but do it. I didn't really want to get involved with it. So it kind of goes into a story that I have. At the time, I was flying small airplanes as charter airplanes around the islands and as in the Puget Sound of Washington. And I was coming up from a trip from Tacoma, Washington, up to the San Juan Islands. It's about an hour or so. In pilot talk, it'd be actually 76 minutes, the flight. But I was coming up, and I fly these little small airplanes that have this particular radio that you can pick up AM stations. So a little pilot trick is to listen, on your way up when you're sitting there to what's going on. And normally pick up sports games, things like that. And I happened to pick up a talk show. I didn't really know what it was about. But they were talking about money, so I said, I'll listen to this. And next thing you know, I hear, about cash and about debt is dumb and all these things. And I heard the name Dave Ramsey, and I thought, I'll listen into this. So here I'm in the air, flying over a really cool area. And so I'm listening to this. God always picks out very interesting times and places to reveal things to you. And so I hear Dave Ramsey, and I hear all this talk, and then I hear money, and then I hear Jesus in the same sentence, and I thought, wow, these go together. What a thing. And basically, God spoke to me at that moment, and it was about a month or two later after Keisha had started the envelopes, and I got home, and I told her, guess what I found out? And it turns out it wasn't new to her at all, but for me, it was a big deal, and so I decided to share it with her. And we realized at that point God had been speaking to both of us in different ways and different times, and we were about to get on the same page in a really big way.
So did that lead you to what? Did it lead you to financial peace? Did it lead you to just radical changes? Like what?
Yeah.
Where did that go?
Well, it turns out God was speaking to her mom, too, because her mom already had the book in the mail, one of Dave Ramsey's books, Total Money Makeover. And so it arrived in the mail, and I read it in, a day or two. And pretty much all the books he had, I got into it. I kind of nerded out on everything and just went, because I knew there was something inside me, not just the money part, but spiritually God was saying, there's something we got to do. And so I just went all in. And that's when I learned all about the ins and outs of, when we talk about Dave Ramsey, about the program of getting out of debt and paying with cash and having a plan for God's money and what he has put us here to do with it. And I don't think Keisha actually read the books. I just summarized everything pretty quickly. So at that point, yes, we were moving forward with a plan.
It sounds very familiar to me. I read all the books and give the cliff notes to it. So tell us about. So I'm guessing that after you started this, things came to really radically transform in your life with money, with finances, with your relationship with God, because it really is a step of faith to step out and do these things. So I want to ask you about a time that you had to step out in faith with your finances. After you've started this journey and God asked you to do something radical, or you felt like you were supposed to do something pretty significant. Tell us a story about a time when you had to step out in faith.
Well, we had learned, when I was younger, I just thought tithe was a churchy word for offerings. I didn't really know the difference. And so once we got on the same page with what it meant to tithe 10%, and I think we'll talk about that a little bit more later, we were doing okay. We were starting to get expenses and budget in order. But we had read in Malachi, and I believe it's in chapter 3, God says, he's referring to money. Test me now in this and see if I will not pour out so many blessings that you won't have room to store it. And I thought, that sounds like a pretty good deal. And, God says, test him. Like, I don't know. Let's do it. We just decided to do it. And so, I had been given by one of our pastors a book called Millionaire in the Pew. And it is talking about how money and God, it's all related. It's all supposed to go together. And it talks about this gentleman that owned a bunch of retirement homes, and God had challenged him to test him, and he basically tithed or gave on what he expected to make that year. So he literally said, okay, God, you want me to test you? This is what I'm going to tithe on, so at the end of the year, I expect this. We did that exact thing. Well, that's all I knew, so I didn't know a number. And so I went to Keisha and asked her, hey, this is what God is telling me. What do you think about this, and what's our number?
I said $75,000. And he's like, why? I said, because if I make $75,000 or we make $75,000,
we're rich.
We're rich. End of story.
So we tithed, well, on whatever that comes out to be every month. And at the time, for us, it was a stretch. I mean, it was, we were giving well above 10%. And there were times throughout the year that we were like, oh, man, I don't know if we should have signed up for this deal. But we kept going on it. And at the end of the year, after we did our taxes, how much was it?
Exactly $75,000.
It was really cool.
Wow. So
we should have maybe tithed on a lot more or something, Do this again sometime. We have done it 3 times total. We'll talk about that too.
And I do want to clarify that this is, and because I know your heart, this is not we're going to do this so God will do this in our life. It was an attitude of our heart that said, God, what number do you want us to tithe? How do you want us to give? Because we want to be faithful and we want to step out in that faith and in that trust. And it's not a prosperity gospel of if we do this, then God will do this. It's more of a, God, you want to stretch us with our finances and you want to stretch us in our trust.
Another aspect to that was feeling God, feeling his realness. Because at the end, when I saw that tax return, I was like, God is real. Our faith grew so much that, wow, God, you say you're going to do it, you do it. It is so practical, and it felt so good to know that he was involved in every detail of our lives.
And we talked about earlier, that God was teaching us that this was his money that we're going to manage. And it was freeing to think about that it's not ours. And we felt like we wanted to be better managers. You hear the word a lot, steward. We wanted to handle it well. And so this was what that test was. It was, okay, God, you want to teach us? Well, we want to learn everything. This isn't about the money or the numbers. This is about what you're putting in our heart and the spirit of what this is. And so, like Jill said, this wasn't a business deal. This was a spiritual deal.
Awesome. Well, so how do you make the decision on what to give to? So as you've changed the way that you steward your money, and as you change the way that you give, how do you make the decision on what to give to, even above your tithe?
Yeah, and we've done that. We feel like once we give, as the Bible says, to the storehouse here, 10%, this is where we're fed, and we want to give above to missionaries or to something that's on our heart. God typically lays something on one of our hearts, and the first thing we do is we talk with each other. We get on the same page, and that's number one. And if we're not in agreement with it, then we feel like that it's not the right time. So I think the thing is we talk about it and we pray about it. And it sounds a little bit cheesy, but God just gives us a number and makes it real simple. I mean, we've supported a friend of mine that's a missionary pilot in Micronesia, and we flew together in flight training. So that one was real easy for us because he was the first one to come to us as a missionary and ask for that, and it just was easy. Just like God, I think, makes a lot of things easy as doors are open. When I shared it with Keisha, she said, yep, okay, yeah, we're in.
You don't ever fight about it?
Well, there's been lots of times that we say, no, that's not
Just
the right thing.
Disagreement. Disagreement. Okay, that's good.
Well, she's come to me and I've come to her, and we say, I don't agree. And we say, okay, yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. It usually doesn't go exactly like that. But that's the quick version. We discuss.
I was going to say, I'm so impressed. I usually come with like a list. Like, here is my arguments. Here's my reasoning. Well, so, okay, how else have you seen God move in your finances then? I'm guessing you have some more testimony. You said you were going to talk a little bit more about this tithing of faith tithing. I don't know, what do you call it?
Tithing on what you expect, I guess, faith, trust building. So the second time we did this, we were moving from Washington to Austin, Texas, and we felt like we needed to do it again, to trust God this time. Of course, the end result is faith building, but trust God. Les was moving to go to University of Texas, and we were moving into a rental. I didn't have a job. We just knew we were supposed to go. And he wasn't going to be working. So we moved with a little bit of savings and no job and moved into a rental. And we said, the number that came to mind again to me was, I need to make $40,000 to support us and to pay for our bills. And with the experience that I had at the time as an executive assistant was not much, less than 5 years. And a recruiter was helping me find a job in Austin. And she said, if you find a job that makes $40,000, and this was in 2008, I will throw you a party, is what she said. So that wasn't very promising. I was like, okay. So I kind of went outside her help, and I went on Craigslist and applied for a job that didn't say how much it paid. I just put it out there. I probably applied for 75 jobs on Craigslist alone. Got a few calls back, and so I went in for this interview, and they said, we pay $40,000 plus benefits plus bonuses. And I was like, I need this job. This is it. And they offered me the job like a few days later, and we had been tithing on me making $40,000 when I didn't have a job.
Yeah, it was out of our savings.
We were using our savings to tithe for that, and it took, 6 weeks for me to get a job. So that savings was dwindling rapidly, very quickly. So that was another God, we trust you moment, and this is what we feel like we need, and we want to see you provide and build our faith.
In each of these instances, how does your mindset change? I mean, are these just multiple opportunities to see God in a different way? Like, what are things that are being changed, broken, shifted? Yeah.
Yeah, every time it's difficult. I mean, God doesn't give us the same challenge every time because our faith has been grown. So you think, this next time is going to be easier because we've done this before. But he says, no, I got a new challenge for you. So I think the mindset and the scariness is the same. But you go, he did it before, and I remember that. And I'm going to use that to remind us that God is faithful. And we tithed before, and he did his part. I'm pretty sure, like what it says over there, God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's going to do the same thing. In fact, what came to mind when we were talking about this yesterday is you cannot afford not to tithe. And the other thing, I just have to mention this, is we don't actually give God 10%. We just get to keep 90, which is a lot. And so we thought, okay, this is not that hard, but it is. It was a little scary. And so the mindset, our faith grew, but we were still challenged just as much as the first time that we tested God.
And I think it solidified in our mind how important tithe is, just the 10%. I mean, not this faith-based expectation tithing, but just the tithe that the 10%, we need to be faithful. And I think that's what it solidified, is that we are like, there's no way that we're not tithing our 10% now.
I was really struck by what you said about that it actually doesn't get easier. That just because we have stepped out in faith and we've seen God move, it doesn't mean that the next time it's like no big deal. Maybe you move a little bit closer. Maybe it's a little less time. I don't know even if you can even measure it. But thank you for saying that, because I think that's true across the board. with anything that God asks us to do, that we think it will just get easier and easier and easier, and oftentimes we're just as challenged the next time as we were the first time, and we saw how faithful He was. So what are some mindsets and things that you feel like you are still struggling with today, and how do you walk through financial uncertainty even now?
You know, with all this that I feel like God has entrusted us with, as it grows, I feel like a lot of times we don't deserve it. Sometimes we think, God, why are you having us do this? Why are we even up here on stage today? How are we anything special? And God just reminds us that we were faithful from the very beginning with $1 and $2, and now it's grown. And sometimes, you know, the money just to pass in our hand and then pass on to someone else, and we just are managers. And I feel like it's easy to say I don't deserve this, and God says, no, I have a purpose. And so I struggle with that.
I feel like we're unworthy of the stewardship that God gave us. But how we deal with uncertainty when those struggles come is we have to remember that we were obedient in the beginning, and because of that, God has set us up in our finances. You know, we have a plan. We have an emergency fund. We have savings. And so I have to trust Him in that. When uncertainty comes up with Les's job, because aviation is very volatile, when that happens, we just have to say, God, we're trusting you that you set us up, that we put the plan in motion that you told us to do, which is Dave Ramsey's plan. And so we followed that, and here we are. That's all we can do is trust.
Because you guys have mentioned this several times, Dave Ramsey and financial peace, is this one of the tools that you use to keep you on track? I mean, obviously, it's never like, I just learned all this stuff, and I'm just going to go and do it and hope it all works out well. Like, you have to continue with having these plans. You have to continue to be fed, the truth, because the world just wants to tell you to charge everything, and it doesn't really matter, and get it because this is what you want. Like, what are the tools that you use to help keep you on track with stewarding His money?
Yeah, and I'll say this to Jill and family here. This is it continues, and we talked about earlier, but I knew nothing about money. Everything I've learned, I've had to learn on my own, and I've read, and because I feel like God wants me to know, and I feel like all of us are supposed to know. We're supposed to be the example. You know, God talks about money a lot in the Bible, and so we're supposed to know about it. And practically speaking, we use a simple app on our phone called Every Dollar. I mean, we know, if you were to ask me right now, I know exactly where every dollar of this month of November is going. We have a plan. And so practically speaking, we still do it. You know, we're still disciplined to do this. Just because we learn it doesn't mean that we just relax in it. We're still pushing forward. We still have challenges, and we're still disciplined every day. I think we figured yesterday we've done 156 monthly budgets in the last 13 years, and we've never missed one. I always tell people if a budget's good for Google and Apple, it's probably good enough for us. You know, we look at it like a bad thing, like, well, I don't want a budget because it's limiting. In fact, it's the opposite. It's really freeing, because when you do spend the money in that particular category, you can feel good about it because you made a plan.
And I think financial peace in general, that gives you structure, gave us structure of how to get on the plan and where to start. Because, I mean, we started all this with a bunch of debt. We were pretty typical. We had student, credit card debt, anything you can imagine, we had it. And that's what we had to start. We had to start small. But I think we kept consistently doing a budget, and that's what our discipline is what counted.
Do you guys have meetings?
We have meetings. When we first started
board
out,
meetings?
Keisha made them a little goofy because I'd get too serious and nerd out, and she'd make us wear cowboy hats. And so we wouldn't take each other too seriously when we were talking about it.
I love that idea.
Yeah. So we had to dress up for our meetings.
I forgot about that.
So now, you know, we've been doing it now. We're in a pretty good groove, but there's still times that it's a big deal that we're on the same page, because she's the spender, I'm the saver, if we were to make it real simple. And so we think about things differently. If I didn't have her, I'd have a bunch of money and be super boring with a bunch of money. And if she didn't have me as the saver, she would have a lot of fun and have no money. And so we need each other. And I think it's good. And so we discuss this budget because we know that God wants us to do it with excellence. And so we make sure that we discuss and we compromise, because we know that neither one of us is totally right, that we need each other to hash this out.
Yeah, and I think that it's not that complicated anymore. It does get easier, that communication aspect. Now he's like, okay, I have the budget up. Why don't you take a look at it, see if I missed anything, you know. It's much smoother now after 13 years of doing it. But also, if an encouragement to people who maybe don't have a spouse to look at it. He's been doing his dad's budget for about 10 years now, and him and his dad is not married, and he looks it over every month just to have that second set of eyes on the budget. So it's really important to have that accountability and a second set of eyes on it, I think.
That's amazing. My next question was, are you good with money, or did you have to learn to be? But it sure sounds like you guys have had to learn to be, and that you have to practice to be good with money. And yes, there are some people who are just gifted and and just have that kind of a mindset all the time. But I think a lot of us still struggle with what we are supposed to do and how to manage all of that. So
and you find the way you like it. I mean, I'm into numbers as a pilot, so I've got into it. Keisha looks at it more like it's fun. It's a game to see how we make all the numbers work every month. Without cowboy hats, now we still have fun with it, but we are just absolutely amazed every month throughout the year that God is always, you know, if we have a difficult month, God's still there. It never ceases to amaze us that He meets us every time.
And it doesn't always make sense, does it?
It never makes
doesn't.
sense.
It doesn't.
And we never try to figure it out at the end of the year. We just say, it worked out. Let's move on.
That's really reassuring, actually. So the last question I have for you is, what advice do you have for us on our financial journeys?
Yeah, I think I'd said it before. First of all, I mean, this is all a spiritual deal, not a money deal. But I mean, it kind of goes together. And like I said before, you cannot afford not to tithe. I mean, it's good. It's so good when we do. It's so cool to see how God wants our best and our first fruits, and He wants this the first thing to come out. And so it's really cool to be able to do that. And secondly, my biggest advice is you got to have a plan, just like we plan everything. Sometimes things come up, but I like what Dave Ramsey says. You know, a budget is telling your money where to go, not wondering where it went. And you got to have a plan.
And I would say, if any of what we've shared today has resonated with you and you want to get better with money, I would say start now. That would be my advice. Don't wait, just start now. Get a plan, talk to somebody about it, and just get going.
That's good, because I think sometimes we think, well, when I make this amount, or when I have this job, or when I'm done with this, or maybe after the holidays, after I've run up a bunch of debt, or maybe whatever, then I will start. But it really does make a difference if we just start with one thing right now. And I want to let you guys know that the next trimester for TRCU, we are offering the Financial Peace University course, if you would like to go through it. How long is the course?
I believe it's
9 weeks?
8 or 9 weeks.
Something like that. And it is an investment, because you do have to pay for the materials as a part of it, which seems really kind of funny sometimes when we're like, I'm really struggling with money, and now I have to pay $100 to be a part of this thing. But it's like the best investment, because it is what will help you get back on track. And it's something that you could do with your spouse if you have one. And if you don't, then just go and get the information now, because what better time to start than before you get into all of these conflicts.
Yeah, and it's a great place to find that accountability partner, too, is in the class, because there are always a ton of single people in the class. So,
what I think is really interesting is that finances are really personal, and so we get really uncomfortable talking about them. But it's nice to just like blow the door wide off and say, let's talk about it. Let's be accountable, because this is all of God's money, and we are just, like you said, we are just stewards of it. And I want to just say really quick to end this that God has been challenging me personally in the last few months, very specifically. He's always said this to me, but like it has hit me so hard in the last few months that he said, would you just try doing it my way? That over and over again, I just think, oh, I got it, God. I know what you want me to do, and I'm just going to do it. And he's like, would you just try doing it my way with your time and your talents and your treasures, and see what happens and see that I don't. See that I won't do what I've said that I'm going to do. And, I think we can get overwhelmed and say, well, I'm not like Les and Keisha. Well, they've been doing it for 13 years, and there's a lot that they have learned in that journey, but they're not done, and neither are you. And so, actually, my final thought is very similar to Keisha's, which was every journey has to start with one step. There's definitely one thing that we can do today that we didn't do yesterday that will lead us closer to where I think God wants us to be, and that's free, not just financially free, but free to trust Him, free to submit to Him, free to enjoy what He has given us. Because I think that's when you are not always in a scarcity mindset, as Mark has talked about, then you are free to go buy tanning lotion, and nobody is going to be mad at you over it because you've put it in the budget. And it's like, if that's how I want to spend my $50 this month, that's how I'm going to spend my money, because it's freedom, and it releases us from a sense of control and that sort of thing. So I want to very humbly say thank you for sharing your financial journey with us. Thank you for sharing something so personal. I appreciate you. And I appreciate your advice. I'm going to close this in prayer, and then we're going to have the worship team come back out. So, Lord, it really is all yours anyway. Our time, our talents, our treasures, you have given all of this to us to use for your glory. Lord, may we hear you today as you tell us that one step that we could take. One step that will lead us closer to true north. One step that will lead us closer to the path that you have for us, that you have set out, and the ways that you want to be known in this church, in this community, in this world. Lord, you have invited us to be a part of that. God, thank you for trusting us. Thank you for teaching us. Thank you for loving us. And thank you for Les and Keisha and their willingness to share, Lord. Would you continue to bless them as they have testified to your goodness and your faithfulness in their life. In Jesus' name, amen.